Record. Share the screen. Recommended watching and viewing here. And where are we? Over here. Okay. Basically today, it is now 2 p.m. and we are, last day to drop classes is today. I always recommend over-registering and then dropping the classes that you're least excited about. I wish I started doing that as a senior in college. I wish I would have done it every semester. Okay, Friday, on Friday, you have a discussion forum due and reading notes of Masciotra's article online. It's a popular article. It's a book review on the hookup culture on college campuses. I'm not going to say anything else about it. I chose it because I hope it's engaging and interesting. On Monday, we're having reading notes on peer review. On Wednesday, you're going to choose one of 3 articles for project 1. So our first essay is we're going to start working on next week. You have 3 articles to choose from for that essay. One is the case against high school sports. The author's arguing that we should get rid of high school sports. One is what Google learned when it tried to build the perfect team, about the characteristics of teamwork and why that's significant in today's marketplace for psychology type people, or if you're interested in that. And then the other one is more sociological pop culture on the hookup culture, again, in response to Masciotra's work, arguing that it is largely a good thing for young women. So I wanted to give you a choice of articles to read, and you are going to analyze those articles using Bitzer's method. I want you to kind of do your reading notes and planning for your essay by Wednesday of next week, and a soft due date if you want to just kind of write a really crappy version of your essay by Wednesday. That's kind of what I would recommend doing. You can ask questions about that, but the first draft is officially due on Friday before class. Then comments to your peers are due, I said 5 p.m. on Friday because I do want to give people time to then take those comments, and then the final essay is due, I should say, at midnight. So you have not only the weekend, but also all day Monday to kind of revise your first draft and turn in that first project. Okay, that being said, we're basically shifting, given that end point, this lecture and this conversation and this reading is kind of designed to help get you to a point where you know what I'm looking for in terms of a rhetorical analysis, which is basically getting deeper into, holy cow, getting deeper into audience, why that's important, constraints, and to think about common ground and how helpful that is. We had common ground at the beginning of class talking about avatar, and there's a sense you get when you're talking with someone that cares about the same things that you care about. You immediately begin to trust that person a little bit more, or you at least become open to hearing what they have to say. We like good television. Now I want to hear what you have to say. We both think that women need the right to choose whether their own reproductive health. Now we have something to talk about. We both think that life is sacred at the moment of conception, and any ability that a woman has to end that should be stopped federally. Now that we think the same like that, now we have something to talk about. Obviously, I'm putting in some examples connected to the reading, but this idea of common ground is huge. And it really connects to the idea of constraints, which obviously connects to audiences. This is on the idea that we're basically applying Bitzer's theory to a text, and we're just going to move into discussing Swift's rhetorical analysis. There's one claim that Swift is making, that Bitzer's model works to analyze the rhetoric, but I want to just start this fresh and look at basically what. Okay, so questions on goals or anything? Just to review, there's one piece of Bitzer's theory that's not up here, which is the exigence, and that is the problem that needs to be addressed. I think that's kind of obvious. We get what that is. I don't think it's as obvious to understand how constraints work, which is one of the reasons why we're going to slow down and kind of look at that today in depth. Okay, so applying Bitzer's theory to a text, and we have an example of Carolyn Swift's analysis of the I had an abortion t-shirt. What was her claim or her thesis?
That the t-shirt was a relevant response to the rhetorical situation.
Good. I'm going to put a couple different words in here. Relevant, effective. Anybody get another word? The other one that I really like, if we're going to use Bitzer's language, is fitting. Okay, good. Now you have a thesis that you can steal for your essay. Masciotra's article was a fitting response to the situation. Okay, why was it a fitting response to the situation?
Well, Bitzer talked about, or it uses Bitzer's argument about imperfection,
Yes.
that both sides on the issue see an imperfection. And it also talks about how it was aimed at an audience, that it was aimed to people who support the availability of abortion and those who oppose it.
And then there's one other one, and we might be seeing a theme here. Nice work, thank you. You could say that they consider the constraints. Okay, for a piece of rhetoric to work, it needs to respond to a clear exigence, which is a problem. There's an exigence, actually, we can make this plural, exigencies, to clear exigencies, because different audience groups are going to have different problems. It was one of the interesting one of the interesting aspects of this conversation that I hope that we get to have around this and other contentious issues. It is that a certain piece of rhetoric works really well for some people and doesn't work at all for other people. And why is that? Why would this message, so she says this, that it was actually that I had an abortion t-shirt would work well for some groups, but not work well for other groups. Why is that?
She says that it's such like an emotional issue that certain people on like the pro-life side would have such an emotional response that they wouldn't be able to like hear the other side.
Yes. Interesting that would you also agree that it's kind of a belief issue? I might believe something so strongly that I wouldn't want to hear the other side. We talk about having emotional issues, like it's something, like I've heard that a lot. I haven't really heard people having belief issues, because we typically, at least in the West, we have this idea that beliefs and emotions are really separate, when really actually they're not. especially when I am emotionally invested or identify with some of my beliefs, which happens in this kind of a debate. We probably agree with that, right? When I say that I am pro-life, I feel a certain way about that. So much so that if you attack the pro-life position, I may feel attacked personally, even though you're not attacking me. You're just attacking this belief that I hold. And because I hold this belief very strongly, when you attack that position, I feel attacked. I believe really strongly in pro-choice. And when someone attacks that position, especially since I've believed that for a long time, I feel personally attacked. So I think that's really smart that it is our, and then how did she put this in terms of the constraints? She says, this is on 43. Third, there are many constraints that seem to have been taken into account during the production of the t-shirt. Bitzer, 1968, explains that these constraints can be limitations or opportunities. We need to understand why that's significant. It's kind of confusing. The constraints in this situation are political. Is it possible that our political, and that's the example of politics with abortion is a clear one, but there's other situations that our political leanings, political identifications might impact our ability to hear a message, right? So what I wanted us to see from this is that we could say that the t-shirt was relevant, effective response to the situation. Further, if I'm still kind of brainstorming, she says that it was effective for one group and not effective for another. Did we catch this? It would help some group, but it would also not help another group. Did anybody get that in their notes or have language for that? You could say that it'd be effective empowering pro-choice people. Normalizing, she talks about normalizing I language. So it's kind of getting people involved in being identified with this surrounding the situation. But do you think this t-shirt is really going to change anyone's mind on the abortion debate? I mean, even regardless of the article or not, if someone was on campus with a shirt that said, I had an abortion, do you think they would be changing many people's minds about abortion?
Well, I agreed with the last part of the article, at least, that talked about how the arguments of pro-choice people that they provided in this article was that they rely on a trauma aspect. So I definitely agreed with the part that normalizing things and not letting them rely on their trauma argument is an effective argument. Normalizing it is a huge or an aspect of it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, going off of what Paul said, the author was talking about how a lot of pro-life people use a lot of grotesque images of aborted babies or something to try and sway people one way, but I feel like you can use that argument with the shirt. Maybe the shirt won't change much, but I feel like that kind of imagery won't change much either.
That's
Maybe
right.
it'll affect a more sensitive audience, but I mean, if you're devoutly pro-choice, I doubt that it would affect how you feel.
It's really interesting that you use the word devoutly there. For pro-life people who are already devoutly pro-life, not going to change their opinion. Does this seem right? Do we kind of agree with her conclusion here? Might be effective in starting conversations, might be effective in empowering or emboldening pro-choice individuals. But probably not going to change pro-life positions. It's kind of also, I feel like I just need to make this point that this, in the division between pro-life and pro-choice, is already rhetorical in the definition of those terms and how they're used. I have a hard time with that division because I'm pro-life and pro-choice. Like, I just feel, I don't know, not from what the, I don't know. I actually don't want to wade into this, except that these terms are very interesting, already rhetorically charged and often rhetorically used to promote their position. And we'll see that a lot. We see that a lot in politics for sure, because we get behind certain ideas that we then identify with. And that's really what you want if you're starting a political party. You want people to identify so much with your platform and campaign that they will do a lot of work on its behalf because they believe it. Okay. So there's a couple things that I wanted us to see from this. Are other responses from the text? If this were our essay, we'd want to make sure as soon as possible to define these as specifically as possible. So responding to clear exigencies, she says that there are really two clear exigencies that this is a response to. And one of the reasons why the shirt works is because it responds to them. So we'd want to have those specifically in our notes. In this case of the articles, anyone want to take a stab at what those are? Or did you get them in your notes ideally? To really, I mean, you could say there's she says there's exigencies for the pro-life camp and the pro-choice camp because they both think there are imperfections in our debate about abortion and imperfections in abortion policy based on your position. He also says that there's a women's rights march. There's a debate over reproductive health. And there is also an upcoming presidential election where this is one of the, and this is in 2004, 2006, I think, I can't remember, that these issues were going to be decided. Aimed at appropriate audience groups, we would again want to be specific as possible there, which would be the, you know, these different groups. Now we're in a position to look at this. The constraints in Bitzer's terms are anything that influences an audience group's ability. All right, they also both have agency. That was the main point, to change the situation, i.e. get out and vote or those kinds of things. I get, let's say, how a constraint might limit my ability to act if I'm an audience. How is a constraint also an opportunity? Why might that, did anybody get that? If constraint is limiting my ability to act, how could that be a good thing if I'm trying to convince someone of something? If you're trying, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I kind of got that it, like, they can learn and it encourages discourse.
Yes. So constraints are anything that affect our ability to act. And they can be, as a limitation, they impede our ability to act. But as an opportunity, they can encourage our behavior, our action, encourage our action in a particular way. So, I mean, the easiest example of seeing this is if you care about money, I'm guessing that you do, and I have this opportunity at a good job for you to make money, I might use that money as a constraint, knowing that you need to make money, and I'm going to take that, what would be a limitation, into a kind of opportunity to kind of encourage you to act in a certain kind of way. And I think Swift argues pretty well that this kind of a t-shirt is a limitation for one group who already is kind of anti-abortion, and an opportunity for another group that is pro women's reproductive rights at the same time, suggesting that different audience groups can react to the same thing in different ways, which is relatively obvious if we keep variety of friends on Instagram or social media. And by variety, I mean people who have different political or different beliefs than we do. That gets into a whole debate on cancel culture and some other interesting things. Okay, there's two real questions that I want to get to. Aspects of an audience, aspects that differentiate an audience. So like how are audiences different from each other? Differentiate an audience. And what all audiences have in common. Let's go with the first one because again, and this is directly linked to your ability to do excellent on the content question on your analysis. If you tell me that this article works really well for the audience, but then you don't tell me what audience you're talking about, I'm not really sure who you mean. And we know that different people interpret situations differently. So what kind of factors might limit someone in different ways? Like how do we, or another question, if you're in marketing, how do you create a market segmentation to make sure that your product is or make sure that your marketing is effective to the people that you want to reach? What kinds of things do you consider that can make people different?
Generational differences.
Yes. What are the main generational differences you could look at? That's a big question, I guess. Okay, Boomer. Have you guys seen that video on the millennial workplace problem? I'll have to share that with you. We'll have to look at that. Good. Other differences? This could also just be age. What else?
I was thinking like occupation.
Yes, good. Can I just put experience in there, broadly speaking? And if I have like experience as a welder or a farmer, I'm probably going to see things differently. Good. That's a great one. Other ones?
With like geographical
Yep.
differences.
Yep.
Uh,
I don't know if you spent very much time in New York City, but it kind of breeds a different kind of approach to the world. So does Kansas, or Alaska, or Fort Collins, or Boulder, or Tuscaloosa. Good. Just kind of hinting at another one, not just geography, but what else? Other differences. I'm thinking of cultural differences associated with those geographies.
Maybe like the importance of religion
Yes.
in certain like states.
Yeah. Your general belief system. Great.
Also to that point, sorry, education.
Yes, education. And you mean like how far, what do you mean education?
In like a broad sense, maybe like higher education. I don't know. I don't want to like make a stereotypical connection in between like just the correlation of really religious states and a
Sure,
lack of higher education. Like I don't want to
Sure.
make those connections, but like they're kind of there.
Sure, there's correlation and it's not necessarily, definitely not causation. There's other cultural and economic, here's another one. Huge landmark study that plotted zip code as the only determining factor with how much money you make when you grow up. So interesting to note that if you were born in the zip code of Stanford University, you are way more likely to make a lot of money than if you're born in a zip code of inner city, or another giant one was on the east and west side of St. Louis. Freaking crazy. Good. Other differences? I think that's actually pretty good. Am I missing? Oh, maybe gender. Nationality or race might play into this or not. Okay. So if we're thinking, when we're reading and we're reading more critically, how many of you did not like Bitzer's article? That's maybe that's a bad thing. It's a bad example. Do you think Bitzer's article works for some people and doesn't work for other people? We actually could say this with Carolyn Swift's. Who do you think she's really writing for with this piece? What's the or Crystal Lane Swift's? What's Crystal Lane Swift's audience for this piece? It's in the Journal of Technical Writing and Communication from 2007.
I think probably like around college age or young adults, to see an example of rhetoric employed in like a real life example.
That was definitely what the original editors of this book put it in there for. So for sure, in this reading, that definitely makes sense. It is actually geared towards college students in that sense. We'd also kind of agree that do you think it's for people with more than a high school education, i.e. college students and above, and age group and that kind of a thing? Seems to me the ones that seem the most relevant here, generational difference, experience, maybe political experience, and education level. Okay. We could make a lot out of the different characteristics that differentiate some audiences from other audiences. I actually want to spend a little bit more time on what all audiences have in common. And this is from, there are needs and values that we all basically share. And so if there's something on this list that you don't need or you don't value, would you say so? Because then the list is kind of messed up. Maybe not. I'll give us the first letters and we'll do my favorite Family Feud game. This one. All right, what do we need? That we all share. And this is a sense that these are going to be constraints. So, in the sense that constraints can be opportunities and not just limitations. So I can appeal to these in my thinking and in my writing and have a good sense that the audience is also going to care about these. What do we care about?
Was the first one shelter?
Close. I mean, it goes in there. Shelter, food, warmth, safety. Our general survival. Good.
Is the second one healthcare?
Yes, or just health. This is a sense of well-being. It's interesting, in this list, they also include strength, endurance, energy, and mental stability. I can get behind, knowing that when I'm unstable, it's hard to be healthy in other ways as well. Good.
Freedom.
Ooh, no, kind of weird. That's good. Freedom is going to go. I should have said this. Yeah. I was thinking about asking what do pro-choice values and pro-life values, kind of, whoops, pro-life values. Let's say that both sides value freedom, just they define their terms and understand it differently. So yeah, freedom's going to come up in a lot of these, but it's not one of these. What else do you feel like you need? And what else do you care about?
Friends. Personal security.
Boom. What else? We have the respect and esteem of others. We have the need for self-esteem to match our own. This definition of self-esteem is interesting. Meeting one's own standards in such virtues as courage, fairness, honesty. So 2 ways to build your self-esteem: lower your standards or increase your performance to those standards. I don't know if one's better or not. This is an interesting one. New experience. Do we need new experience? They're showing more and more that we do. I've also charted that people that take different way to work every day also say that they're happier than people that don't. Weird. And the final one on Maslow's hierarchy is self-actualization. And if you did notice that this list is from Maslow's hierarchy of what we need. So this does go in somewhat order, where once you have your survival needs met, you can start worrying about your health. And once you have your health needs met, you can start worrying about your finances. Then you can start worrying about friendship and affection, respect and esteem from others, self-esteem, how you view yourself. You can get new experiences and begin to actualize yourself. In fact, this might be an interesting way to see Edmondson's argument, is that if we're too focused on college for financial security, we may miss college's experience to give us the ability to really actually become more of who we are. Okay, the last one here is convenience. And now we have a kind of like big operating list for brainstorming how any given text or anything is persuasive or not. It's interesting, the t-shirt is offering some of these things to the wearers and the viewers of the t-shirt, right? And this is another way to look at why the t-shirt works. It seems like it's functioning at this level of community engagement that we can, that's an expression of solidarity, you could say, or respect and esteem of others, and a feeling of, in any case, these get built into our sense of identity. And this dramatically affects whether or not we accept an argument or not. Does this make sense? Do we agree that how I see myself and how I see the world is going to affect whether or not I believe what you say when you try to convince me of something? Obvious? So then what I'm asking you to do now and in the future is to identify the key aspects of this that seem to be at play. Why is this argument compelling? Who would it be compelling for? One way to build this up, or your ability to do this, is developing and reading with a certain sense of empathy. I had a big breakthrough with a student previously who really couldn't understand what people saw in an article that we read, the hookup culture one. And I was like, well, can you imagine the way that your parents would think about this article if they read it? and they were like, oh yeah, they'd be like, they would probably want to share it with their friends. And I'm like, boom. Can you imagine what it would be like to be another person reading this? If so, you're well on your way to being able to write effectively, where it's not the text that matters as much as the audience that matters. This means, in other practical terms or considerations, we can think of, we might also break down an audience in terms of how friendly they are to our position. It's like a friendly audience is one who already agrees. We're going to have a different goal if it's a hostile audience who already disagrees, or a neutral audience who's undecided. Would we want to approach the argument differently if we knew that our audience already agreed with us or disagreed with us or is undecided? Hopefully, obviously, yes. How might we do this? What would the goal of each of these be? What would I want, like, how would I affect, if I'm trying to get an audience to act? If you say a neutral audience, the goal is to convince. I'd say with a hostile audience, the goal is to share a perspective or to just get them to consider. So please just consider this. I'm not trying to change your mind. I know you're not going to, because you're way too invested in the identity you have going on. Like I'm way invested in the identity I have going on. But I do still want you to consider this perspective because I think it's important. Or the goal is really, if the audience is friendly, is to take action. Like, we both agree on this. Now it's time to get moving. Okay. So what I hope that we can see is that why we're doing this is that writing really comes down to your audience. Who are they? What do they care about? How do they care about it? How can I serve them and give them what they want? And now we can make one other key point to writing essays in this class. Do you think Crystal Lane Swift considers the convenience factor of her audience? Do you think she serves them in that point, in that way? She tried to make it convenient for her audience, and if so, how? If not, why not? She does a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to. One is that her very first paragraph is an essay, what I call an essay map. She basically says, in this essay, first, and this is kind of short, she kind of has like a hook to get you into it. And she asks the question for context: was this an effective piece of rhetoric given the fight for women's rights? Bitzer's rhetorical situation theory leads us to the conclusion that it was. That's her thesis. To understand the answer to the research question, we will, she doesn't put the number one, but that's what we will, 1, discuss women's rights movement, 2, define Bitzer's rhetorical situation model, 3, apply Bitzer's theory to this t-shirt, and 4, draw implications from this criticism. If you look at, and then she uses headings of a 1, her first heading is the background. Then she uses Bitzer's rhetorical model, and then the model. Then she draws implications, and then she has a conclusion. And the conclusion is a restatement of the intro in this model that we like in the Western world, but I've read Asian cultures do not like as much. We say, this is what I'm about to tell you. This is now I'm telling you. And then at the end of the presentation, this is what I've told you. So you kind of give your reader that this is what I'm about to do. Now I'm doing it. This is what I did. Or in the context of this presentation, this is what we're going to do. And this is what we did. And now I hope that we see that we have some kind of, ideally, some common ground. We want it to be easy. I thought her article was really easy to skim. Good topic sentences, good headings, easy to jump around. So, 2 reasons why I wanted us to read Crystal Lane Swift's. One is that it gives us an example of a kind of high-level rhetorical analysis where she's looking at how a piece of rhetoric is interpreted and affected by different people, and to understand that those people's positions are going to affect the way that they read that rhetoric, and to see how she begins to tease that out. So it's not just effective or not, it's effective for some groups and not effective for other groups based on this primary political division about how they already felt about abortion. It's going to be pretty similar to what we're going to see on Friday. This article is going to be good or not, depending on who you are and what you think. Secondly, is that it's a good outline. The only thing for your essay. And we'll look more into that next time. The main part of it that is a good outline is when she goes into the reasons. It's the third part of her essay. It's using how the t-shirt is rhetorically situated from 42 to 44 are the key pages for that you can copy, quote unquote, for your own essay. Imitate, appropriate, utilize.
Sorry, can you expand on down towards the bottom, the model part of the outline?
Yes. That is, actually, I had better notes on this earlier. This was her, she basically, that was applying Bitzer's theory to the t-shirt. She first does the background of women's rights movement, then she defines the rhetorical situation. You don't need to do that in your essay. Then she applies Bitzer's theory to the t-shirt. That's when she goes over exigence, audience, and constraints. That was the model. So she's just using Bitzer's model. Thank you for that question. That was confusing. Then she draws implications, and then she restates the conclusion. Great question. My hope is that in thinking about rhetoric like this, you're going to start, a switch is going to switch. And you are going to start thinking not in terms of good writing or bad writing, but in good writing for particular audiences and bad writing for particular audiences. But then you're also going to start seeing, oh, that's right. This would work for a lot of people because it's easy, clear, specific, not wordy, and it touches on things we care about. Justice, the environment, freedom, the economy. Okay, on that note, I did give you some other, I wanted to forward this letter from the Office of the Provost and the Vice President. Has some resources on CSU stance on being overtly anti-racist. And I put in some of my favorite sources for that, namely a Swedish film from the 70s on the Black Power movement that I found fascinating and has got great music in it. 13th documentary on Netflix. There's other resources in here that I thought were significant. And I didn't have enough time to plan to incorporate these. I knew it would take kind of the whole time to understand what I wanted to get out of Swift and to see how that relates to the hierarchy of needs, which should help you write your essay on next week. Cool. Stop the share. Any questions? I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and get some good reading in and good thinking in, and let me know if I can help in any way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let
Just
me
a
know if
quick
I can help. Please.
Our self-assessment and
Bye.
revision due tonight, are you
Yes.
wanting the same type of like 25-point breakdown
Yeah.
like we did last time?
Yep.
Okay, sweet.
Same
Thank
thing.
you.
You're welcome.